I'm Justin Coppice. I'm a senior group manager for R&D at Johnson Johnson MedTech or DePuy Synthes, and a member of the OMTech Advisory Board. And I'm happy to welcome you to the session and introduce our speakers this morning. So welcome to the panel discussion, Challenges and Opportunities in Designing Enabling Tech Instrumentation. This session brings together OEM and supplier perspectives to share how to effectively design and manufacture these complex instruments. Our moderator is Bobby Nandy, Vice President of Operations at Ortholine. He has over 20 years of experience in the medical device industry and a proven track record of establishing, scaling, and leading operations groups. Prior to joining Ortholine, he worked at Cherumo Corporation, Neurovascular Division, Microvention, Sequent Medical, InfraredX, Medtronic, and Stryker. He also serves as a member of the OMTech Advisory Board. Our panelists are Richard Lordo and Reto Strickler. Richard Lordo is Director of Robotics Hardware at Smith & Nephew. He has more than 30 years of medical device product development experience, including leading mechanical engineering and hardware testing for orthopedic surgical robots, systems, and enabling technologies. His responsibilities have included managing globally distributed teams, including R&D, operations, technical writers, and quality and regulatory activities. Reto Strickler is Vice President of Operations, Orthopedics, and Site Leader at Elos MedTech Holstein. With nearly 30 years of hands-on production experience, Reto brings a manufacturing-first perspective to discussions that are often dominated by design or engineering alone. He specializes in translating product concepts into scaling manufacturable solutions with a strong focus on cost efficiency and industrial scalability. Please join me in welcoming our speakers.
Thank you, Justin. Before I start, I did want to just ring that this topic is especially resonates with me. As Justin mentioned, I'm Vice President of Operations at Ortholine, where we're trying to bring empowering and enabling technologies accessible to all. And so this is especially keen to me, along with our panelists here, Richard and Reto. So why don't we just get right into it. Before I start, though, we want to keep this engaging and informal. So if you have any questions, Nancy's in the back with a microphone. She can come over to you. We won't have a Q&A at the end. We want to keep this kind of very much as interactive as possible. So on that note, we want to start with our first question. So maybe for you, Richard, why do you think enabling technologies require such dramatically tight tolerances, and what are some of the manufacturing challenges unique to robotics and navigation instrumentation?
Yeah, that's probably our biggest challenge. Traditional orthopedic instruments, they have to be robust, reprocessable, have to work well. But when we get into, and I'm sure you face this too at Ortholine, our surgeons expect us to be very accurate with the data that we're presenting to them. And therefore, we have very large tolerance stacks that aren't just the mechanical parts. We have tracking devices, whether it's an infrared optical camera, IMUs, EM tracking. All of those contribute an accuracy piece of the budget. We have software latency, hardware latency. All these things come together, and what traditionally could have been left just to the instrument now is divided up to me and software in these other systems. And we're expected to be accurate sub-millimeter, 1 or 2 degrees in implant placement. We're tracking things that have long distances between where the tracking array is, so a minor change dramatically impacts what we're projecting to the surgeon. And that has to last over the lifetime of that product after all that reuse and everything. So that's at least how I see it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And one of the unique challenges we have at Ortholine is that we are not an implant manufacturer. Our device is implant agnostic, but because of that, we have to develop instrumentation that can be used across a whole host of implants, the DePuys, the Strykers, the Smith & Nephews, and what have you. And so it's making instrumentation adaptable to a whole host of implants, not being an implant manufacturer ourselves, just introduces a whole level of complexity for us. Maybe the next question for you, Reto. Why do you think early contract manufacturer involvement is so critical for enabling technology programs?
I think when we are involved in an early stage. From the first drawings, we can bring manufacturing insights and help to save costs, to reduce the surface radius, etc., that we have less cycle time, and in the end, a cheap part. I think these insights in the beginning, it's important. After the V&V section, then it's done. And before we have the chance to bring our insight in.
Yeah, I found that also, I absolutely agree. And I found that that early involvement from a design iteration and cost-effective strategy before decisions are made where cost is being put into the design, getting CM involvement to understand the challenges of if you go with this process, the cost implication is X. However, early stage processing for cost savings activities, it's easier at that stage than, say, through a design validation, process validation activity. Maybe to you, Richard, what do you think an effective OEM-CM partnership really looks like?
Very, very open communication. I think one of the things that hinders things is when, as a OEM, I treat a supplier on a need-to-know basis and just show you a drawing or show you the part. But if I tell you what I'm doing with it, how it's going to work in the system, what's important to me, the feedback that I get back from suppliers has been immensely helpful. We've changed tolerancing schemes, we've changed materials, we've changed the way the part's designed based on that feedback because the machinist making the part knew what I ultimately was going to do with it. And likewise, I want really open communication from our suppliers. Tell me when I picked a really bad plating. Tell me when I picked a material that's going to be really hard to manufacture, really hard to control, hard to get. So that constant, open, truly, really open communication, I think, is the most important.
Reto, any comments?
No, I think that's important for both sides to save the timeline, to reduce the misunderstanding, that the clear communication with the goals and also with the insight from the production and from the engineer to find the best solution for the product. I think that's really important.
Yeah, and I found also that an OEM putting their shoes in the CM spot and vice versa, as opposed to I've seen quite a few supplier customer relationships where there's almost a wall of kind of throwing things over, so to speak, very much traditionally like the R&D to manufacturing, throwing things over the wall. When you kind of break those down, put yourself in the shoes of your as an OEM, putting your shoes in your suppliers, and then your suppliers understand the challenges of what the OEM is trying to achieve. Again, as early as possible in the product development process. That saves cost and just establishes a stronger relationship down the line. Maybe for you, Richard, next conversation topic. How does prototyping differ for enabling technologies versus just traditional orthopedic instrumentation?
My personal opinion, I think traditional instrumentation, you could make your prototypes with your in-house machine shop, get a drawing, and then probably take it to a manufacturer and get it manufactured. With the enabling technologies, we are, again, back to that tolerancing, how the parts interact at the sub-assembly level. I need that feedback early on to influence the direction of the design to achieve these tight tolerances. If a traditional orthopedic instrument wore a little bit or had more variability, you probably just didn't notice. I still could pound your femur implant on, but now that I'm tracking it, I need as much feedback as we can get from a supplier about how to make that part, where I can trade off tolerances. If you know what my whole assembly needs to be doing, tell me, I can control that part way more than I can control that part, and we can balance that. So that level of feedback has just been immensely helpful to my team when we get that level of interaction. And I think it's necessary to deliver on the timelines that people are expecting.
How about Reto, from the CM standpoint, in terms of traditional orthopedic instrumentation versus developing instruments for enabling technologies? What are some of the challenges on the CM side that you've kind of
From our side, we need more resource to prototyping in the robotic field. We need from the beginning on all measurement results, and the documentation are much more than a standard orthopedic instrument. This reason, Richard explained, he must know which tolerance that he can have, and we as manufacturer, we are in negotiation with the engineer to find the maximum from the tolerances, and for that we need a whole team from beginning on, the measurement technician, engineer, etc. And as a group, we are successful.
It's very much that push and pull. Also, the parallel between R&D product development and manufacturing. Traditionally, R&D folks like yourself, Richard, want very tight tolerances. Manufacturing folks on my side want very wide tolerances just for scalability of manufacturing. I found a lot of those parallels in the CM OEM relationship.
I think a big difference, at least the way we've been doing business lately, is we are trying to identify the final manufacturer and have them build 2 or 3 iterations of our prototypes, and not just worrying about the rapid prototype being the way to do it, because we learn something from each of those iterations that informs the manufacturing of our design verification build and subsequent builds, that I'm not surprised with out of tolerance parts that then all of a sudden, the first time they get a chance to manufacture them is at that design verification build. So I think it's very important that you're actually doing your prototyping where it makes sense with your final manufacturer much earlier than traditional instrumentation,
and allowing your product commercialization timelines to include, as difficult as it is, a couple iterations, knowing that odds are you're not going to get it right the first time, right?
Right.
Great. Maybe next topic. So what lessons are typically learned too late? And again, this speaks to kind of what we were just talking about. Learned too late during development. How should they be addressed earlier in the process? I know we touched on that, but any specific examples of?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's subtle things. It seems odd to say it, but figuring out that you don't agree on how you're setting a part up on a CMM at the very end at your design verification, you can't agree whether or not the part's in tolerance. It's surprising that back and forth will lose a month just resolving that problem. Like it's little things that get lost. Not that we don't know how to exchange drawings or CAD models and know how to do a process capability study. It's all those little subtle things that just really take 2 weeks to resolve at the when you don't have 2 weeks. Nobody at the end, right? I'm sure you guys have never had enough time. The engineers eat up everything, and that last phase is no time for anybody to recover. And so these little things like that are the things that I learned with manufacturers. Find out that you've used a vacuum deposition plating that can't get into a nook and cranny, and now what do? You've done all kinds of testing, and you have to change the process. Things like that are really what I find we learn.
Along those same lines, and I think earlier we had this discussion, but the face-to-face interaction, maybe Reto, from the CM side with the OEM of, if it's a part setup on a lathe or what have you, can you maybe speak to just the value of the face-to-face interaction between the OEM and the CM to maybe relieve some of the stress in this relationship?
I think that's important to solve problems fast, but also to share knowledge and ideas from both sides. And I think that's the only path that are successful to come soon to the end, to a good result.
Sure. Great. Maybe next question for you, Reto. So why are CMs being asked to support production level validation earlier in development? And what do you think some of the benefits of that involvement might be?
I think we can share former validation, that we can say, hey, with this material, we have all validations done. Can you try to change the material, or worst case scenarios from former project? I think that's important that we speak from the beginning on about the validation requirements, that we are faster also on the timeline, and when the product is done in the end to discuss about validation, it's always hard for both sides.
Along the same lines, Richard, can you maybe speak to having a design that's ready for, say, design verification, design validation, and then last-minute changes, so to speak, before the commercialization activities, and how you address maybe the differences between the validated state of a product versus, I'll call it, the commercialized state?
Yeah, so in our world, there's not much difference, because as soon as senior leadership hears the verification summary report was signed, they want to know when you're launching. There is no time to change, and we've all probably experienced a senior leader in a company telling Wall Street, we're launching this product on that date. And as you get close to that, when you have something show up at the end, and manufacturing these parts, they're not short lead times, right? We're probably talking between 12 to 25 week lead times. So to rebuild parts to re-execute design verifications is very, very costly from that timing perspective. And that's just unacceptable in a lot of environments when public commitments have been made. So bringing our contract manufacturers in as early as we can to help make sure that we proceed through that validation without surprises has just been key to successful projects. It cuts down stress for everybody. But recovery, the team is basically told, fix this, but don't change anything, because you've already validated everything, right? So that's your new goal, is fix it, but don't change anything. And that's a very, very poor way to fix something.
Reto, on the CM side, when you're asked to produce a product for validation purposes, however, when you get a commercial PO for a design that's maybe slightly different, that requires last-minute changes, like what are the challenges? And obviously, as an OEM, we look for flexibility from our CMs to kind of, I'll say, throw in some last-minute changes. But maybe talk to some of the challenges on the CM side that you're faced with producing one product for validation purposes, and then commercial quantities for that same product with some changes. So, for example, I've been in this situation where we ask a CM to produce, I'll call it, 50 units of this instrument for validation purposes. However, my counterparts on the R&D side discovered through physician testing that, hey, we need to tighten this tolerance to X, or we need to add some more material here. We understand you validated this iteration. However, we need you to tweak your design, revise your machinery to produce now 1,000 units of this revised design. How is that? What kind of challenges on the CM side has that presented based on the validated state of a product you've been given to by a customer versus what they actually want?
The challenge is when we produce the validation parts on a productive machine, we block this resource, and when we have a lot of change that need a lot of time, and this is the reason that we try to go in a prototyping shop for the first run, and when the validation stadium is reached, we go on the productive machine. Otherwise, we lose a lot of time and block resources. But the back and forth, that's normal. This stadium from the
Sure.
validation.
Maybe if I could put myself in Reto's shoes, one of the things I feel like we do to our contract manufacturers when that situation arises, we all love to say we have our ISO 13485 certificate, and we all have processes. We say we need to take our time to follow our process, but as the contract manufacturer, we need you to deviate and get this done right away and upend your process. So we send a pile of turmoil to contract manufacturers, in my mind. When we make that last change, it's like, hey, I know you have a document approval process, but you need to get it done in 2 days. We need this prior. And so I think I don't know if you guys feel that or not, but that's one thing I see happen over my years, is our process is sacrosanct. Your process, you should be able to adapt to our needs. And that's through multiple entities, not just, and so.
Speaking on the product development side, how do you draw the line between obviously rapid prototyping, whether it's inside your factory or a smaller rapid prototype house, versus taking it to a CM such as Reto to go through the validation activities? How do you draw that line?
risk of the design. So there's some things, enclosures and things like that I can probably not worry about and know we'll successfully make those. But if it's in our rotating, our drill, the design there is so critical. We try to make sure we do at least one complete build before the design verification build. So we kind of, in the hardware team I work at, we've driven that as a policy for the last 3 years, is really pulling back that far. We're fortunate we have a research team that does some debugging and proof of concept work. They do everything with rapid prototyping. So we have a group that works out a lot of the concept first, and it's all done however they need to get it done, in-house, rapid prototyping. They rarely use a production supplier. When it gets to my team, our first 1 or 2 go-arounds are rapid prototype, but we quickly move to trying to involve our chosen contract manufacturer. We have to prod the procurement team to go through the supplier selection process earlier than they would like, but we do try to do that early. So at least one full bill.
Sure. Rhett, how involved are your customers in involving the CM on the design side, understanding what your customer is trying to do, as opposed to throwing a drawing to you and saying, make 1,000 of these. Like, in your experience, do customers involve you on the design side to understand the best way to produce a product at a cost-effective, scalable manner?
When you have a good cooperation together, yes. when they have the learning that they can save time and costs, when they come in an early stage to us, then yes. My new customers are mostly the other side. They send a drawing, please make. And then we struggle in the production with the feasibility, and that's always a problem. The best success we have, as we talked before, when we are in an early stage together, what's the goal, what's the purpose for this part, and when we bring all insight from the production, engineering together, then we are successful.
How receptive do you find your customers to when the CM has a design recommendation? How receptive is the customer to certain design recommendations you might have?
By new part, most likely open. By existing part, then after validation, when we are second supplier, etc., then it's hard to bring changes on the drawings. But by new part, the customers are open.
And I understand there's lots of situations. Maybe Richard, from your side, when a CM comes to you for a design tweak or recommendation, obviously your team has put in a lot of work to get it to that point. But can you speak to some of the challenges in an OEM or a CM recommending design changes to you?
Yeah, it's you're sometimes you get booted all the way back to your DFMEA on the parts to try to figure out if those feature changes affect failure modes and things like that before you can decide if you can implement the change. We're fortunate our team's very open to the feedback, so we don't have a lot of resistance to it. But depending on engineering testing that's been done up to that point, if it deviates significantly, certain parts of the organization want to send you back and see another round of testing, yet we're in that timeline to move forward. So working through what's an appropriate justification for some of these design changes, and how does it invalidate or not all of the learning we've done up to that point with our bench testing. Those are the biggest discussions that we get into. And it's a lot of face-to-face negotiation with the quality engineers, manufacturing engineers, and design engineers to decide whether or not we can accomplish this. Some simple DFM feedback changes radius because of the cutting tool. Those are easy, but if it's a more substantial design change is when we have a little more hand-wringing.
Sure. Going back to something we spoke about before in terms of just the tight tolerance and the level of rigor for designing instrumentation for enabling technologies versus maybe traditional orthopedic instruments, do you find it's more difficult, so to speak, to take that feedback from, say, a CM, given the tight tolerances on the enabling technologies and instrumentation side versus how it used to be, maybe?
I haven't really noticed that with our team. Partly because we also do electromechanical stuff, and for years the electronics industry, board manufacturers, they have these DFM scorecards. You get that, so half the team's been used to. You always get this feedback, and you have to respond to it, or they tell you they can't manufacture a circuit board. It's not going to solder well, or things like that. So I think I haven't seen as much resistance to taking that feedback. It's just sometimes the work to get everybody else on board that we need to make the changes.
Sure, sure. And Reto, maybe on the contract manufacturer side, have you found that because of, again, the tight tolerancing on instrumentation-enabled technologies, your customers are maybe a little bit more resistant to feedback, just given the level of rigor that the customer is asking for, versus maybe developing instrumentation for traditional orthopedic methods? Have you seen a difference in that respect?
No, I think that's more or less the same. I think it depends from the product range. It's more or less the same.
Sure.
I guess the one difference I think that the enabling technology, and I would imagine you see this, is, we're mostly talking about mechanical parts here in this forum, but you can do your tolerance analysis there. Sometimes changing that changes how we modeled the part in the software tracking system, and now the ripple effect to the software team being impacted by a mechanical change. Then we start getting into even more debate where, they've already said our whole accuracy budget's set up, we chase this all the way through these detailed algorithms, and now you guys want to change the modeling of that part. There's where we get the more strenuous debates.
Yeah, and to your point, at Ortholine, we deal with that all the time. We have with our handheld units that has gyroscopes and sensors to monitor leg and knee and hip movement, developing the instrumentation to be used in conjunction so that the data that our unit is providing is accurate. We see it all the time where tolerances are being tightened, shifted, dimensions are being adjusted, kind of to account for some of the data that's being generated by our software. We have kind of two levers that we can pull. We can either revise software to take into account some of the tolerancing on the instrumentation, or tighter tolerancing on the instrumentation side to account for some of the software accuracies. So.
And that carries into the downstream side. If we don't really have these things nailed down when we launch, 6 months later, our contract manufacturer really can't produce at scale. They're having a lot of fallout. I've got fielded product now. Now if I'm affecting software, now trying to make that mix and match of, does this software version working with that mechanical version, becomes a logistics nightmare. And it is very different than a standard orthopedic instrument where you just ship the new one, it still works. You're not worrying about backward compatibility to fielded platforms.
And what are some of the challenges on the, just my own ignorance, not having too much familiarity with robotics in general, but on the robotics side, I imagine it's the same challenges of it's maybe more, is it more difficult to change things on the software robotics side versus the instruments, or?
No, actually, we always jokingly say software is free, right? You guys just have to type code. So there's validation work. It's more the deployment side of it. Once you're fielded, because now when you have different configurations and you start getting more permutations of software, mechanical hardware and electromechanical hardware, and how do I maintain compatibility and test all that, the testing burden goes up tremendously for us when we start affecting things that affect multiple parts of the system.
Sure. And maybe on the testing side, one of the challenges we have is trying to figure out, okay, is this change substantially different from the previous iteration, whether it's software or instrumentation? Do we have to undergo a revalidation, or can we kind of build some parts on a bench to kind of prove effectivity? So maybe can you speak to how you kind of draw that line?
Yeah, I mean, we tend to manage our process being very requirement heavy, where everything is listed as a requirement. So we go to, where's that requirement being impacted by whatever change? How many test protocols did it touch? What other things is it linked to? We're able to trace that out, and that tends to balloon into a pretty big spider. And then we have to go through and look at all those system level tests or hardware verification tests, which of these are truly being impacted by it. But for us, it goes back to, because we have a lot of detailed requirements, is how we've managed that. But it gets to be a lot of work, and there's no free time available in schedules to all of a sudden introduce a big testing effort. Even with a product support team, they've got their plans. So it becomes I jokingly say, you start looking like kids playing soccer. The ball's over here and everybody runs over there to solve, and then the ball went there and you got to run and solve that problem. So it's very disruptive.
Sure. And maybe, Reto, along those same lines, can you maybe speak to, I imagine, speed to market. Customers are asking you to accelerate validation timelines and builds, but also build full-scale volumes for commercialization. How do you balance that with maybe validation requirements that you, as a CM, you're required to make sure changes that are being made are validated? Like, how do you kind of balance customer speed to market versus internal testing that you require to ensure validation requirements are being met?
We have only one chance to bring the whole team from the beginning on the start line. We need every engineer, measurement technician, etc., validation specialist, etc., from beginning on in the team. Before we manufacture a simple part, sent to the customer, the feedback came back. And now the requirements are so high that we are only successful and only can accelerate the process when we have a huge team behind. I think that's important also in the interaction with the customer, that the team members from the validation side, from our side, and from the customer side can talk to each other. The measurement team can talk to each other. I think that's the only way that we can accelerate the process.
Maybe we can pause here. Is there any perspective anyone in the audience would like to provide on just the balance between the CM-OEM relationship dealing with enabling technology instrumentation?
Great conversation. I'm the obligatory AI plan. I have a question for both sides, from the CM and the OEM. Are you using AI as a tool to go back and look at previous work, how you can speed it up? From the CM side, are you using that, talk about large teams, can AI reduce the number of teams that you need, predicated on the inputs that you're getting, because DFMAs are a killer for having been that CEO to drive the train and market manufacturing. You don't understand how long that can take. So how are you using AI to mitigate that?
Yeah, Richard, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. So we've started not so much on the retrospective design side. We are using AI tools to help us create initial test cases. So one thing we've done is we've moved our test engineer involvement up from the verification phase to the design input phase. Every requirement, they need to agree they can test it before we're allowed to write it as a requirement. And so now we're generating test cases so the design engineers have an idea of how we're going to test the design. So I have to live with a foot in both worlds. The hardware verification test reports to me and the mechanical engineers, so I watch them create conflict for each other. But we're using tools to help us with generating those test cases to get them in front of people much earlier. We haven't really done the retrospective piece yet.
In the production, we not use AI. We try to do that in the programming from the products, but we start to use AI in production. I think that's important that we do this fast. In the moment, we are old school in the factory, but we have a lot of sector where we can use that.
Yeah, we're very much at Ortholine. We're very much we're dabbling in it for sure. Being a software company, we have software engineers who are using it, but we're realizing that the horse has left the barn, so to speak, and that we're trying to figure out developing corporate policy around usage, what platform we use, how it's used, what data are we inputting into various programs such as Microsoft Copilot and what have you. And so it's almost like we're trying to land the plane, so to speak, as we're building it, because it's out there, it's being used, and trying to developing that policy around it.
Thanks. It strikes me that perhaps one of the thorniest differences or challenges between standard instrumentation and those that are for enabling tech is, and you talked about it a little bit, is kind of that stacking tolerance and then how it impacts your whole operating and your system windows. So can you maybe talk about that a little bit more? Because I do believe, in my mind, it seems like that can be one of the very difficult and challenging differences between those two types of instrumentation?
Yeah, for sure it is. Like I said, in traditional orthopedic instruments, they needed to be durable, work, but there wasn't for the most part. I mean, there are things that do measurement. A cut guide, you have to have the angle right and things like that. But other things, they didn't have that accuracy component. But now the surgeon expectation is if they're doing the surgery robotically, they are getting accuracy. And they expect very tight accuracy when we provide things back to them. So now we have to take what used to be a mechanical exercise and give away some of that to, like I said, the tracking gyroscopes, EM units, inertial measuring units, cameras, whatever that is. The software, which is a little hard to characterize, how quickly is my calculation matching when something's actually moving in space? So we are taking all that away. My engineers are very good at doing tolerance analysis. They have great 3D tolerance simulation tools, but that's based on where they applied the tolerances. How did they put the datum structure on the part? How did they allocate the tolerance? If they did all their work and then the contract manufacturer comes back and the CMM operator says, I have no way of setting up on those datum surfaces that you picked, I can't tell you whether or not you've met that tolerance scheme. That's a big issue because I've got a lot banked on knowing that we were going to get to that window. So that's where having literally CMM operators in the early discussions saying, you should tell me, I can get you this, this, and this as your reference points. You should be dimensioning it off of that. We can do that. And it makes an immense difference in that now we can allocate the precious budget we have better, is how my joke with CMMs, and my team loves it, is I always say it stands for can't measure much, because you're always arguing between two CMMs. But it's a huge problem at the end of a project when that is like the thing the quality organization says, whether or not you're going to use your parts. Do they pass their first article inspection and that CPK? And it's all dependent on that. Changing that ripples all the way back through all those other analyses. That doesn't happen on traditional orthopedic instruments the same way. That's my
and I found along those same lines that enabling technologies where there's real-time feedback required versus traditional instrumentation, as in our example at Ortholine, as cuts are being made, as movements are being made, whether it's the hip or knee, and having that real-time feedback on a computer screen or a handheld navigation unit, that requires inherently tight tolerancing, which really wasn't the case, call it 20, 30 years ago with traditional orthopedic instrumentation.
I got a question for Richard. I appreciate, and it was talked a lot, that early involvement is super important, right? So my question is, if you don't know the supplier, if you don't know Rector's company,
Yeah.
How do you choose them? You don't have a quote. Or with other words, is there any element in your scorecard where you evaluate your suppliers on how much they help you in the design phase? Is that a consideration in your supply chain?
It is in supplier selection for our projects. Yeah, our manufacturing engineering team helps with a scorecard, and one of our categories is past history with support for R&D activities, and so it does go into our ranking. So typically, we are working. Smith & Nephew's fairly big. We have a fairly large supply base, so we're most likely going to be directed to work with a current supplier and have some experience with them. But we've had situations. I'm in one right now. We can't settle on which supplier, so I'm buying parts from both of them at the same time. Now, we get the budget flexibility to do that because we're enabling technologies. Not everybody gets that. But to de-risk, I've actually got 2 complete sets, which is a real challenge because they all want different things on the drawing from the DFM, and trying to satisfy both is a difficulty. But so in times we even just, to us, that one-time cost of those parts pays huge dividends in not having the surprises down the road, and fortunate to have a senior leader who believes that story as well and has seen it work. So we will do anything we can. We will even just pay a supplier and tell them, you don't have an awarded business, but I will pay you for your time. Don't give me your time based on assuming you'll get this business. I'll pay you for your time. Most of the time they're interested because they think it'll give them a leg up as well. But I do everything I can to talk to a supplier. If not, we also have in-house machinists. We're a bit vertically integrated in our implant side, so I have some resources I can talk to.
Yeah, I found early involvement, just being me being selfish on the operations side, early involvement of supply chain in the vendor selection, even in the in the skunk works and I'll call it phase two type development activities. I've been in way too many situations, I'm sure all of us have, where a supplier was chosen strictly to meet timelines, quick prototyping. Before you know it, you're married to that supplier who's unable to scale, and now going to a larger CM to kind of scale a design that they're not familiar with. It's almost like you're redoing an entire validation.
Yeah, and I think it's incumbent on the development team, when they know the right suppliers in the supply chain, to lobby for that supplier to be selected. And I've been successful, and it doesn't turn out to be the low-cost supplier. But if you have a development team who's willing to properly articulate the skills of a particular contract manufacturer, and because they've worked with them, it very much helps that process as well. So I think your design team has to understand they need to be an advocate for the right resources.
Reto, how often, along those same lines, how often have you been put in a situation where customer X is coming to you saying, we had a manufacturing shop produce this design, but we need to scale, and you're given a design that someone else is able to make at very tight tolerancing, that you're required to maybe almost reverse engineer how that part was made so that you can actually scale that product?
It depends from the product. Most likely by the robotic parts all the time. That's a back and forth, and without them you are not successful. By the instrumentation part, it's less. There we receive the drawing and then it's done. But this technology, robotic, etc., it's a must.
Great. We're running short on time here. Maybe the last point discussion I wanted to bring up is maybe Richard. How can engineering teams improve collaboration during very rapid development cycles?
So it kind of goes back to something I said at the very beginning. Don't treat your suppliers, they're on a need-to-know basis and it's just the drawing. I think you have to really take the time to give a full understanding of what you're doing. I mean, if we can, we will go to a supplier site and demo a prototype of the product. So everybody from the machinist to the inspection people, program, everyone understands what's going on. So I think it has to be just super open communication. Sometimes the procurement folks aren't happy with us about that. Like, they feel like we're getting away too much. But to me, it's just you have to give the full context, because we need people to understand where the trade-offs can be made when they are facing them. They know how to give us better feedback. That's and the same thing with a supplier is just anything you see, send it to me. I never turn down feedback.
Maybe Reto, from the CM side, how do you think your customers' engineering teams can improve that collaboration to ensure product development cycles are being met?
For us, it's important. When we receive this information or picture or samples, then we can give that to our team, and our team knows what is the difficulty in this product, what is important, and the whole team can help also to accelerate the process when they know what's going on and what's the purpose from there.
Before we close out here, I'd like to thank everyone for attending, and I'd like to thank my panel members here, Richard and Reto. If you can be so kind also as to fill out, there should be a survey in front of you, so you can fill that out. We'd appreciate that, but thank you.